Okay, so we're picking up tonight's class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and as translated by Swami Nikhilananda. And we're on page 235, starting with Tuesday, June 5th, 1883. Although I think I'm going to read that song just before this, just because it's such a beautiful, beautiful reminder, actually. And there's so much stuff in it. So, all right, so we'll just jump in. So this was the song that was that Ramakrishna sat down. If you remember, Bhagavati came to visit, and she touched his feet, and he got stung like a scorpion, like by a scorpion, and embarrassed her terribly. And to console her and to take away her embarrassment, he comes and sits down by her and sings her this song personally, which is a very touching moment, if you can think about it. You know, when somebody had the courage to approach him and got horribly embarrassed because of her immoral life, and yet Thakur really, I mean, there's a couple of ways of looking at why it happened. From my analysis over the years, it just seems that, you know, she had a guilty conscience from her life, and so that's why she sat in the back when she first came. And then the thing that gave her comfort was the fact that she had built a bathing ghat, you know, and for the public, and that it had a little plaque there with her name on it. She was very proud of that, and it was based on that she came forward and took the dust of Sri Ramakrishna's feet. And so I've always seen that as, and that's when he reacted with that terrible sting when she touched him, and literally panted and ran across the room to get Congo water to stop the pain. And then afterwards comes and sits down next to her and sings her this song about where her true value comes from. And this is why I think that it was a matter of egoism, you know, that Thakur was showing her that you can't approach God based on your accomplishment or your goodness or your efforts or any of those things, that we always approach God in the humility of grace received from the divine. And then he, page number 235, Regina. And then, so he was teaching her by singing this song to her, where our real value comes from. And it comes from the divine nature within. And that's where we get our confidence, not in how we're doing in our spiritual life, not in how we're doing in our life, but by the very fact that we are divine by nature. We have that full divine potential within, and that is touched and released through the grace of the divine, which allows us to draw near. And so the song that he sings to her, it's just always one of my favorites to read. I think about this quite a bit. He says, dwell, O mind, within yourself. Right? And what does that mean? It means not outgoing toward the senses, but that you're inward facing to the shrine in the heart, and that you're there with your mantra, your constant prayer, of chanting God's name is going on in that shrine. So dwell, O mind, within yourself. Be established in that place, not in the world of the changing, not in the world of the senses, not by that, but in the silent space behind them. Perch yourself there. Once you find that space, perch yourself there and chant the name. Enter no other's home. You know, so exactly that. This is your home. Going out into the senses, you enter any other home, any other place of refuge. You know, that was, you know, we have all in our life all these refuges that we do. If we're lonely, we call a friend. If we're depressed, we go to a movie. You know, if whatever, it's like we've got all of these other shrines that we worship at. And when Mother says, you know, take refuge in me alone, she's not being jealous, you know, that, oh, don't go to anybody else. She's saying that because she is the only refuge. If you take refuge in Mother, you're transformed. You transcend your weakness. You transcend your ignorance. If you go to the world or any other home for your refuge, you just get distraction. Nothing gets fixed. Your broken self is waiting there when you come back from your distraction, whether it's going out to whatever it was you went out to do, When you come back, you're still the same person with the same problems. And so the need for distraction never ends if you take refuge in anything else. If you take refuge in the divine through grace, that inspiration will touch your heart and slowly open up your inner eye to the reality of divine love, a love that's not conditioned. So enter no other home. If you but seek there, you will find all that you're searching for. Everything that you're restless for in this life, everything that you want to get or have or own or touch, can be found deep within, because really in all of your desires is the name of God, right? And we've talked about that a little bit. If you're looking for relationships, it's because your divine self is wanting to return to its unity. If you're looking for money and fame, it's because you know yourself to be omnipotent. The soul knows itself to be omnipotent and is trying to manifest that in the finite world. And so all of your desires are trying to fulfill your nature that is missing because of your identity with body mind. You've forgotten your true self. And so if you but seek here in the shrine of your heart, you'll find everything. And all the pieces necessary for your contentment are available to you always where you are. God, the true philosopher's stone, because God, that's that transformation. God alone is the transformer. God alone can transform you and change you, open you up to being a pure manifestation of that divinity. And so God is that only philosopher's stone who answers every prayer. This is an interesting one. God answers every one of your prayers, and he answers your prayers in the affirmative. But he averages them all together. You know, every action, every thought, every word of yours is a prayer. And God, being the experiencer of your life, actually, knows every one of those prayers. And he answers them in the affirmative after he has found the average, put them all in the pot, shake them and boil them down to your complete prayer. And so this moment of your life is the answer to that prayer. This moment of your life is what you have, the sum of all of your desires, the sum of all of your aversions has created this moment for you. And so God, who answers every prayer, lies hidden deep within your heart. You know, the richest gem of all, the only one really worth having. All the others disappear. All the other ones have expiration dates. This divine nature within is the only thing that lasts. And the effort that you put into knowing that and to developing that space within yourself, quieting that space within yourself, that will follow you to the end of your life and beyond. Vivekananda says the only thing that goes past the grave with us is our virtue. And so this richest gem of all is the cause of that virtue, that love of God, that grace that inspires us and lets us drop our baggage so that we can always feel the strength and the permission to start again. How many pearls and precious stones are scattered all about the outer court that lies before the chamber of your heart. So all of your gems, there's the one major gem, and then all of the gems that come with that, all the fruits of the Spirit, as the Christians like to say, your joy, your love, your compassion, your kindness, your selflessness, all of those gems that lie scattered in the courtyard before the divine are also yours, and they all develop in the same way, just through the echoing sweetness of the name of God in the shrine of the heart. All right, so Tuesday, June 5th, 1883. Rakal and Hazra were staying with the master in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar. M, too, had been there since the previous Sunday. As it was a weekday, there were only a few devotees in the room. Generally, people gathered there in large numbers on Sundays and holidays. It was afternoon. Sri Ramakrishna was telling the devotees about his experiences during his God-intoxicated state. The master to M. Oh, what a state I passed through. At that time, I didn't eat my meals here. I would enter the house of a Brahmin in the village or at Baranagar or at the Aryadaha. Generally, it would have been past mealtime. I would just sit down there without saying a word. If the members of the household asked me why I had come, I would simply say, I want something to eat. Now and then I would go, uninvited of course, to Ram Chatterjee's house at Alambazar or to the Chaudhurys in Jakshineshwar, but I didn't relish the food at the Chaudhurys' house. I love little bits like that because you can imagine Mrs. Chaudhary just must to have that said about her kitchen in the gospel forever. I don't know what she cooked him, but something happened there. One day, I begged Mathur to take me to Devendra Tagore's house. I said, Devendra chants the name of God. I want to see him. Will you take me there? Mathur Babu was a very proud man. How could one expect him to go to another man's house uninvited? At first, he hesitated, but then he said, all right, Devendra and I were fellow students. I'll go ahead and take you to him. Another day, I learned of a good man named Dina Mukherjee, living in Bagbazar near the bridge. He was a devotee. I asked Mathur to take me there. Finding me insistent, he took me to Dina's house in a carriage. It was a small place. The arrival of a rich man in a big carriage embarrassed the inmates. We too were embarrassed. That day, Dina's son was being invested with the sacred thread. The house was crowded, and there was hardly any place for Dina to receive us. We were about to enter a side room when someone cried out, please don't go into that room. The ladies are there. It was a really distressing situation. Returning, Mathur Babu said, Father, I shall never listen to you again. And I laughed. Oh, what a state I passed through. Once, Kumar Singh gave a feast to the sadhus and invited me too. I found a great many holy men assembled there. When I sat down for the meal, several sadhus asked me about myself. At once I felt like leaving them and sitting alone. I wondered why they should bother about all of that. The sadhus took their seats. I began to eat before they had started. I heard several of them remark, oh, what sort of man is this? Here there's a lot of Indian tradition here that's not familiar to us in the West. But at these bandaras or these big, usually at when your child is receiving the sacred thread, you'll throw a big feast for all of the wandering sadhus, all of the wandering monks in the area, and they'll come, and there's a pecking order, of who is the most revered and who is the most respected and who's the most sincere, and so those monks with more clout expect to be fed first. Those who are seniors, who have been monks longest, expect to be fed first, and it's a matter of protocol that happens. And so when Ramakrishna goes and just starts digging into the food right away without paying any attention to all of that pomp and circumstance, the monks even are now are offended by this, which is really quite hilarious. Because
well, actually, he was the number one spiritual person present.
Yes, well, that's true, but not in their eyes. One, because
right.
He was married, and two, he was living in a temple. He wasn't a wandering sadhu, and so there were a lot of reasons, because he was quite unconventional. Thakur really was a breaker in a lot of ways, and this was one of them. And so he didn't have the respect of the other monks at this point, and probably somewhat of a jealousy was around there also toward him. But so they're getting all upset, and the fact that when he sat down, they were asking him all about him personally. To Thakur, who wouldn't even use the personal pronoun I, except in extraordinary cases, was like, why are they wanting to know all of this utterly unimportant stuff? I mean, he took his monasticism quite seriously. It's like, this is unreal. Why are monks talking and asking about these things? And that made him want to withdraw, to go off by himself. So it's really, really amazing. All right. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the steps of his veranda. Hazra, Rakal, and M were near him. Hazra had the attitude of a Vedantist. I am he, right? Vedantist in this sense at this time meant an Advaitist. It wasn't all inclusive like it is now. I mean, it was in a sense, but it was the word Vedantist was used specifically for a Gyani or for an Advaitist at this point. The master to Hazra, yes, all one's confusion comes to an end if one only realizes that it is God who manifests himself as the atheist and the believer, the good and the bad, the real and the unreal. That is, he who is present in waking and in sleep, and that he is beyond all of these. So all confusion comes to an end if you know that one thing, that there is God and God alone, present in everything. He is the dreamer, the grand dreamer, who has become all of the dreamed, just like in a normal dream that we experience in our corner of the mind. So we are part of a dream, as it were, not literally, but as it were, we are in the dream of God, and he has become every one of us, everything. And so if we accept that and can learn that, that will begin to heal the duality within us. We'll begin to see a little bit more clearly that he's become all of this. And it's always important in Vedanta, whenever you talk about the divine, you always have to put in this little phrase, he is beyond all these. So yes, he is all of this and more. He's one without a second. So you always point, because we can't see a whole. WHOLE, we can't see the whole. We've built our whole internal universe out of 5 senses. That's all. And so we're never going to get a picture to where we can say, oh, that is God, and stop at that, because we never get more than a partial picture in anything that we talk about or point at. And so anytime we talk about God, we always say, oh yes, God is the universe and more, the universe and beyond. So there's always these addition of he's always more, because he's infinite. You can't put a boundary around God of any kind, no boundary around God. And so this is always a reminder. Anytime you hear these great sages talk about the divine, they'll always put that and more at the end of it. There was a farmer to whom an only son was born when he was rather advanced in age. As the child grew up, his parents became very fond of him. One day the farmer was out working in the fields when a neighbor told him that his son was dangerously ill, indeed at the point of death. Returning home, he found the boy dead. His wife wept bitterly, but his own eyes remained dry. Sadly, the wife said to her neighbors, "Such a son has passed away, and he hasn't even one tear to shed." After a long while, the farmer said to his wife, "Do you know why I am not crying? Last night I dreamed that I became a king and the father of 7 princes. These princes were beautiful and were all virtuous. They grew in stature and acquired wisdom and knowledge in the various arts. Suddenly I woke up. Now I have been wondering whether I should weep for these 7 children or this one boy. To the Gyanis, the waking state is no more real than the dream state, right? Because both of them end. Everything is temporary. And so because of that, nothing is as it seems, especially in a dream. Nothing is as it seems. And so in this world, to a seer, it's equally as unreal as a dream. They recognize God being the only player, and that all of this is really just a piece of scripture in a way, on an expression of love in all of its multifarious manifestations. And so here's a man who's sincerely confused. Who do I mourn for? Both of them are worlds of the changing. In that one, I was a king. Here, I'm a farmer. And so he, in a real sense, he was a real practitioner, because he saw the unreality of both and was saying, what shall I weep for that one or for this one, or for none of them? God alone is the doer. Everything happens by his will. Hazra, but it is very difficult to understand that. Take the case of the sadhu of Kailash. How people tortured him and in a way killed him. They had found him in samadhi. First they buried him, and then they put him under water, and then they branded him with a hot iron. Thus they brought him back to consciousness of the world. But in the end, the sadhu died as a result of these tortures. He undoubtedly suffered at the hands of men, though, as you say, he died by the will of God. Master, man must reap the fruit of his own karma. But as far as the death of that holy man is concerned, it was brought about by the will of God. The Kavirajas prepare Makara, wow, Makara Dvaja in a bottle. That's number 6, an Indian medicine made of mercury and sulfur, in the preparation of which gold acts like a catalytic agent. All right, so heavy metal for medicine. So they prepare this medicine in a bottle. The bottle is covered with clay and heated in the fire. The gold inside the bottle melts and combines with the other ingredients, and the medicine is made. Then the physicians break the bottle carefully and take out the medicine. When the medicine is made, what difference does it make whether the bottle is preserved or broken? So people think that the holy man was killed, but perhaps his inner stuff had been made. After the realization of God, what difference does it make whether the body lives or whether the body dies? So that really harkens to the fact that the point of your life is God realization. That is what the body is for, nothing else. All of the other reasons and purposes that we've come up with are our own imagination, our own fancy based on ego. And so from the perspective of the divine, once the body's purpose is fulfilled, once you've come to realization, you can throw off the body or let it drop off. There's no need to keep it. And so the master is suggesting that in that sense, this sadhu had been in samadhi, and all the villagers trying to bring him out of samadhi got so zealous in their efforts that they killed him. That he died because of it. And so what is the real meaning of that, or what really happened there? Why did he die? Well, there's several options. One, Thakur admits, perhaps karma. He had to burn up that karma. And so the body took that abuse before he passed as a means of paying karma. And then the other possibility is that he was realized. The point of the body was done, and he just let it drop. He let it go when he came back from samadhi. He just moved on. And it's an important point. It's like after someone's had realization, they're no longer the person you thought they were. They're not that anymore. From their perspective, they don't exist. They are just a manifestation of the divine will. They've surrendered everything else. They've given up everything else. There's no trace of that old self left, unless they make an effort to tie the ego to the body in some way, like Ramakrishna used to do. He'd go into samadhi and he would only be able to come down by asking for a glass of water or for a rasgola or something. He used the love of the devotees, his love for the devotees, as his anchor to keep himself embodied so that he could teach. The sadhu of the Kailash was in samadhi. There are many kinds of samadhi. My own spiritual experiences tally with the words I heard from a sadhu of Rishikesh. Sometimes I feel the rising of the spiritual current inside me, as there were the creeping of an ant. Sometimes it feels like the movement of a monkey jumping from one branch to another. Again, sometimes it feels like a fish swimming in water. Only he who experiences it knows what it is like. In samadhi, one forgets the world. When the mind comes down a little, I say to the Divine Mother, Mother, please cure me of this. I want to talk to people. None but the Ishvarakotis, that's the companions of God, like the disciples of Jesus or the disciples of Buddha. Ramakrishna, at some points in the gospel, points at different ones of his disciples and says, "Oh, you were a disciple of Jesus when he came. Oh, you were with Krishna dancing with the cowherd boys." So these Ishvarakotis, these divine souls that never get total liberation. The Divine Mother, lets them come up there and spend time in the heavens, as it were. But whenever the incarnation decides to come again, to manifest again, he brings them with him, and they go through their play again, over and over and over again. None but the Ishvarakotis can return to the plane of relative consciousness after attaining samadhi. Some ordinary men attain samadhi through spiritual discipline, but they do not come back. But when God himself is born as a man, as an incarnation, holding in his hand the key to others' liberation, then for the welfare of humanity, the incarnation returns from samadhi to the consciousness of the world. Right? So his love for us is great enough to pull him out of samadhi and for him to come back down to this plane of confusion in order to help us have our own realization, to give us our moksha, to give us that opportunity. And we would be stuck without that. Look, we can hardly get ourselves to accept grace, let alone make ourselves perfect. And so it's a touching thing he's saying here, that the whole reason for him coming into this world and going through what he went through, or even Jesus going through what he went through, or Rama going through what he went through, every time God really, really puts himself through the ringer for the express reason of showing you that he's willing to, that it's more important to him, to her, to that we be free, that we find our freedom, we find what the real meaning of freedom is, and that we can go, we can go, even without having to perfect ourselves. God will give us that cloak of perfection to put on, called grace. M to himself. Does the master hold in his hand the key to a man's liberation? Hazra. The one thing needful is to please God. What does it matter whether an incarnation of God exists or not? It was the day of the new moon. Gradually night descended and dense darkness enveloped the trees and the temples. A few lights shone here and there in the temple garden. The black sky was reflected in the water of the Ganges. The master went to the veranda south of his room. A spiritual mood was the natural state of his mind. The dark night of the new moon, associated with the black complexion of Kali, the Divine Mother, intensified his spiritual exaltation. Now and then he repeated Om in the name of Kali. He lay down on a mat and whispered to M, yes, God can be seen. X has had the vision of God, but don't tell anyone about it. Tell me, which do you like better, God with form or the formless reality? M, well, sir, nowadays I think that God without form, but I also am beginning to understand that it is God alone who manifests himself through different forms. Master, will you take me in a carriage someday to Mati Seal's garden house in Bulgaria? When you throw puffed rice into the lake there, the fish come to the surface and eat it. I feel so happy when I see them sport in the water. That will awaken your spiritual consciousness too. You will feel as if the fish of the human soul were playing in the ocean of Satchitananda. In the same manner, I go into an ecstatic mood when I stand in a big meadow. I feel like fish released from a bowl into a lake. This, that just moments ago when it said that Thakur was always in that divine mood, that there was always this atmosphere of spirit around him. And it's because of this, you see, when you're seeing the world as it is, and not as the mind or other things your ego are telling you that it is, you see it as scripture. And everything becomes a teacher in this way. You see in the fish the disciples, and you see the incarnation feeding them, and the excitement of the fish to gather around to eat the food and to partake of the divine play. That he saw that. Or when you're out in a meadow and you watch that beautiful breeze blow across the waving grass on a hillside, there's that wonderful feeling of freedom and immensity. Or sitting at the ocean, and just watching the infinity as the waves rhythmically crash on the seashore. And you can learn all kinds of things about the patience of the rocks as they're slowly worn away, surrendering to the water, as it were. The world becomes scripture to you if you take the time to develop this relationship with the beloved. And if you can learn to dwell, once you find the shrine that's within you, once you find that stillness of the heart, make the effort to camp there, to establish yourself there in the constant echo of your divine prayer, your mantra. And to sit there in that place, soaking like a like a Roscola, of course, says in some places, sitting in the syrup of God's love. You sit there and you watch the world through the senses, but you don't move into it. It's like we're of the world, but we're not in the world, according to Jesus's way of talking about it. We're established within, in the divine love, and our impetus for action is coming from within, from our nature, not from the mind and the senses being prompted by fish hooks, as it were. Being getting a hook in our nose, we smell pizza, and then we're destined to have to go and find pizza. Like that, we're not moved and actuated by senses and by memories, which is egoism. We're actuated by our nature, by the experience of divine love, by experience of the silent calmness within, the infinite knowledge that we are. That wonderful place. Oops. Spiritual discipline is necessary in order to see God. There's no other way to receive grace unless you're in charge of yourself to surrender, right? if you don't have the ability to surrender, if you don't have a knowledge of how you're put together inside, you don't know how to withdraw from mind, you can't hold on to the grace that God gives. It's a very interesting ideal, because when I went and took sannyas in India, one of the best teachings that I got at that time, or for me anyway, was from one of the old monks who came and warned us. He said, see, there's a lot of danger of becoming egotistical about being monks, because you'll be shown so much respect, and people will come to you for answers in their life, and they will ask you answers to difficult questions in their lives. And he said, but you must never forget, you are not able to churn amrita, he said. You're not able to produce that intoxicating drink of the gods, of divine bliss. You're not able to produce divine bliss. He said, all you can do is turn to the ocean of that divine bliss, which is churned by the Mother and by Ramakrishna and by all the saints, that ocean of amrita, and God will give you a cupful. But if you are not pure, by the time you turn around to hand that cupful, that handful of amrita to the devotees, your hands will be empty, because it will leak out of all of the holes. He said, so your task as a sadhu is not to churn bliss to give to the devotees. You are not the source of what they need. Yours is to remain pure, so that when Mother fills your bucket with divine bliss, you can turn around and fill the glasses of the devotees with that same divine bliss. If you are not pure, if you're not practicing your spiritual disciplines, your bucket will have holes in it, and you won't be able to be effective.
Swami, did you say that there was an alternative? Because I'm not a big fan of discipline. Did you say there was an alternative of surrendering?
No.
Oh, okay. And I and why did Sri Ramakrishna have to do all this discipline? It's
He
just
did it
for
for he did it for us. He says, I did all of these disciplines. You just do 1/16 of them, and I'll take care of the rest. So, uh, yeah. And it's not that we have to do them. It's that if we are touching the divine within, we will naturally do them. So it's at first it's an effort. At first it's an effort because we're born of ego, and we're beholden to our senses, and we think our thoughts are our own. And so if they say to do something, we can hardly resist doing it. But yes, the spiritual discipline part is necessary. We have to raise the sail, and Mother will take us the rest of the way. But it's important to know that like it says in the Christian scriptures, God will never tempt you beyond your ability to endure. It's he has not made the task impossible. The amount that you need to do, you're capable of doing. God has made sure of that. And so, yes, as your initial love letter to God, you start your spiritual discipline, and you keep growing. And at some point, it stops becoming the effort, and it becomes your desire. It becomes your desire to offer yourself to God. Once you start getting a clue of what divine love means, and once you touch that beautiful divine bliss within, once you find the shrine in the heart, life after that happens as an offering. It becomes a natural offering to the divine. And your virtues are not matters of effort. As you return to yourself, which means the more you diminish the control of the ego over your life, what takes control is the image of God within. And virtue begins growing at that point. Virtue grows in silence and stillness and surrender within. If you're not surrendered, and if you're busy in the mind in the world of change, and you haven't let go of your ideas of being the doer, and surrendered your stuff to the divine, it's all work, and work, when it's done by you as the doer, only has one product, unfortunately, and that is egoism. You're the doer. And so even if you do manage to become a great meditator, you're going to develop the ego of a great meditator, right? You'll become proud of your meditation. And in that pride, you'll start judging those who aren't, doing the meditation. And you turn into one.
Maharaj,
Yes.
being pure means egolessness, right?
Yes. Well, yes. Now it doesn't. Being pure means removing the sense of me and mine from your life, from your mind. Yeah. And so, we'll never be egoless. Thakur says that for a normal human being, that it's almost impossible to completely remove the ego. He says, so better for us, what we do is we subjugate the ego. We make it a servant of God. We make it a lover of God. We make it a devotee. So we turn our ego toward the divine, and we try and hook the battery of the ego. We try and take the battery of the ego off of the senses and put those cables into the heart. So it's activated by our nature of love and wisdom, and not from the senses and memories as it normally is. So that's what we try first. So he says spiritual discipline is necessary. You can't do this without some effort, because where is your sincerity if there's no effort? Where is your earnestness if there's no effort on your part? Where is your sacrifice? Where is your renunciation? What are you discerning if there's no effort on your part? So definitely it's a marriage of effort, but the effort is only to get the sail hoisted. Once the sail is hoisted, Ramakrishna says, then the winds of grace, which are always blowing, will then take your sail and carry you across the sea. So it's just that initial get your sail up, which means find your shrine within, find the reality of God. Get to the point where God doesn't have to be a belief. Get to the point where you experience it from within. that the divine is within. And you know that within is everything. So get to that point as best you can. Just find the shrine. That's the primary thing. Through following your breath, through chanting the name, and thinking of love, and paying attention to where those waves of bliss come from when they arise. That all of that will take you to the shrine, the inner shrine. In the Philokalia, the Christians talk about finding the shrine of the heart by following their breath. When they inhale, they say the name as they inhale, and they follow the breath with their awareness all the way down, and through that find the place of the heart, the temple of the heart. So that's what you have to do. Get into the temple, chant the name of God, get yourself into the presence, right? It's like taking a suntan. If you don't at least put on your bathing suit and go outside, you're not going to get that suntan. Doesn't matter how much sunscreen you put on. And so that's the thing. Get into the presence of God by doing your mantra, by having your time set aside for the beloved. Do that. Get into that presence. God will take the rest from there. But get into the presence. Find your way to the heart, to the shrine. Let's see. Spiritual discipline is necessary in order to see God. I had to pass through very severe discipline. Yeah, if you read the Great Master, it's stunning how badly Sri Ramakrishna wanted the company of the divine. I mean, it's amazing. There was nothing he wouldn't do. Literally, there was nothing that he wasn't willing to do in order to touch the divine, to have that taste of God consciousness. How many austerities I practiced under the bell tree. I would lie down under it, crying to the Divine Mother, "Mother, reveal yourself to me." The tears would flow in torrents and soak my body. M. You practice so many austerities, but people expect to realize God in a moment. Can a man build a wall simply by moving his finger around his home? Master with a smile. Amrita says that one man lights a fire and 10 bask in its heat. I want to tell you something else. It is good to remain on the plane of the Leela after reaching the Nitya. M. You once said that one comes down to the plane of the Leela in order to enjoy the divine play. Master. No, not exactly that. The Leela is real, too. So he's saying there's some other benefit to coming down. It's not just to play. It's not just to enjoy the presence of God, instead of merging with God. He's saying, no, there's a goodness to it in another way, too. You see that it's real.
What was that other level, Mitya?
Nitya, yeah, the nothingness, the one without a second.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's the Leela, the play of God here in the duality. So M says, you once said that one comes down to the plane of the Leela in order to enjoy the divine play. Master, no, not exactly that. The Leela is real too. Let me tell you something. Whenever you come here, bring a trifle with you. It's got a little footnote here. The Hindu scriptures command the householder to visit a holy man with suitable presents. Right? Whenever you come here, bring a trifle with you, meaning just bring something small, a token. Perhaps I shouldn't say it. It may look like egoism. I also told Adar Sen that he should bring a pennyworth of something with him. I asked Bhavanath to bring a pennyworth of betel leaf. Have you noticed Bhavanath's devotion? Narendra and he seem like man and woman. He is devoted to Narendra. Bring Narendra here with you in a carriage, and also bring some sweets with you. It will do you good. This is interesting. Here he says these are difficult things for him to say. I had this conversation the other day with someone also, and saying that, yes, these traditions, like if you invite a monk to your home, it's tradition that when he leaves, you give him some token, whatever you want to give him, you give him something. Or if a monk even comes to your home, say he's dropping off of something or rather for you. If he comes into your home, it's a blessing to you to offer something to him, like a glass of water or a cookie or a few peanuts or something. It's not considered auspicious if a monk comes to your home and leaves with nothing, because it's your opportunity. Like the Thakur is saying here, he's saying, look, I'm telling you this, even though it looks like egoism, like I'm concerned about getting something from you. He says, it's not like that. This is your chance to offer to God. Offering to a monk is a very direct form of worship, that you are giving to somebody who's trying their best, trying their hardest to be a manifestation of the divine. And so it's your opportunity to offer something very close to the feet of God, right? And it's the monk's job to understand that you're offering that to God and not to him as a person. So that's his work. But your work is to offer, to give a portion of what Mother has blessed you with, to support those who are trying to keep their body and mind out of the world completely. Knowledge and love, both are paths leading to God. Those who follow the path of love have to observe a little more outer purity. But the violation of this by a man following the path of knowledge cannot injure him. It is destroyed in the fire of knowledge. Even a banana tree is burned up when it is thrown into a roaring fire. The Gyanis follow the path of discrimination. Sometimes it happens that discriminating between the real and the unreal, a man loses his faith in the existence of God. But a devotee who sincerely yearns for God does not give up his meditation, even though he is invaded by atheistic ideas. A man whose father and grandfather have been farmers continue his farming even though he doesn't get any crop in a year of drought, right? And this is that whole doing something for the sake of itself, not for any result. We're not trying to earn or gain something. We're trying to remove our delusion and realize what we already have. And so he's saying here, this is, that if you read like Gyani, if you're a devotee, meaning if you're a bhakta, a person of devotion, and that you have your eyes on the incarnation and you're building that relationship with that incarnation and doing your mantra and doing your practice and doing your worships, doing your service and all of that, if you start thinking about one without a second, it'll since you definitely believe in yourself and your own existence, you're still not quite sure about the existence of God, at least experientially. And you start reading something like the Avadhuta Gita or something that, is kind of a text for the Gyanis, for those people going on the path of knowledge. It can hurt your devotion, because you're like, well, what is this God that I'm worshiping? If there's one without a second, if I'm that, why am I worshiping something else? And that's the danger, because it's not the I that you're using that the Gyanis are talking about when they say thou art that. They're not saying that the egoistic I, which is what it's the only sense of I that we have. That's not the one that is God. The one that is God is the transcendent one, the one that has no identity with a particular, no identity with the body mind, and thou art that. And so the Gyani knows that and he sees that. But for the devotee who's not following that path, it's going to strike him differently. It's going to make the suggestion that God doesn't exist. And that's what he's saying here. It's like, be careful, understand God is the only real thing. For the Gyani, it's the person that doesn't exist. It's you separate from God that does not exist. So if we know that going into Jnana, there is a way to read Jnana scriptures as a bhakti or as a person of devotion. You just have to kind of change things around a little bit in your mind as you read it. When they talk about that one without a second, they're talking about God, and you just be a witness to that. And this is why Thakur is also telling us that the Leela is also real. There is something that we're looking at here. It's not what we think it is. It's not a world of objects, but it is a manifestation of of God, the power of God. And so if we can see that in this world, we have to know that milk and its whiteness, fire and its power to burn, they can't be separated, even though they seem like two things. So we can talk about them individually. And so it is with the Leela and the Nitya, the absolute and the relative. This relative world is not just to be thrown away. It's to be transcended, meaning that we understand what it is, that it's basically the body heat of God, as it were. It's important that we know that, but to know that it also has a reality, but that reality is not the appearance. It's the white screen behind the movie that we see when we look at this world. We don't look at the movie itself. We look at the white screen behind it, the light reflecting off of it. And that is a dance with the beloved. It's a manifestation of pure love, the manifestation of pure wisdom, the manifestation of being, of existence. So you should also bring some sweets with you. It will do you good. Knowledge and love, both are paths to God. Those who follow the path of love have to observe a little bit more outer purity. But the violation of this by a man following the path of knowledge cannot injure him. It is destroyed in the fire of knowledge. Even a banana tree is burned up when it's thrown into a roaring fire. The Gyanis follow the path of discrimination. Sometimes it happens that discriminating between the real and the unreal, a man loses his faith in the existence of God. But a devotee who sincerely yearns for God does not give up his meditation, even though he is invaded by atheistic ideas. A man whose father and grandfather have been farmers continue his farming, even though he doesn't get a crop in the year of drought. Lying on the mat and resting his head on a pillow, Sri Ramakrishna continued the conversation. He said to M, "My legs are aching. Please stroke them gently." Thus, out of his infinite compassion, the master allowed his disciple to render him personal service. And so this is the attitude that we as devotees have toward things that we do at the temple, or the things we do for the swamis, or the things that we do for the other devotees. All of it is done as an offering to God. And the privilege of that, to see it as a privilege, privilege might be to see it as though you're being allowed to do it. That mother at that point understands that you have something inside going on, and she allows you to manifest that through service, through worship, externally. It's how what I was talking about the other day, something that I've been going through in the last month, is trying to change my attitude about my practice. Instead of thinking like, oh, it's time for practice, I have to do this, or instead of seeing it as discipline, I've started talking to myself very differently about it. Instead of saying, oh, it's time for practice, I say, Mother's allowing me to practice right now. Instead of saying, oh, it's time for arati, or it's time to do my worship, or it's time to study. I've changed that word. Instead of like that, I always talk, I'm being allowed to do these things. Mother's now allowing me to do these. And it's added so much to the quality of my experience, of my practice, and has added a very nice element of sweetness to it, because you just approach God differently when you know that it's a matter of being allowed, and rather than a matter of being required. And so to really try and switch that view on spiritual life, that we get to do this. This is a big plus for us. This is a big bonus for us in this world. This world without this world without any knowledge of this divinity behind it, is a real tyranny. It's very hard to live in this world without God. It can be done, and many, many people do it, but not with the sweetness, and not with the oiled gears that one can do it by knowing its nature. It was a summer day. We're now on June 8th, 1883. It was a summer day. The evening service in the Kali temple was over. Oh, it's 8:02 already. Okay, let's stop there. That's a good place to break.
Thank you, Swami. Wonderful class as always.
Oh, thank you very much, Regina.
I like that last thing you shared about your changing your attitude. Mother is allowing me to meditate now. Yay.
Yeah, no, it's important to make that switch at some point. And at the beginning, that might not be so meaningful. We have to do our practice, and you do it sometimes purely out of a rote commitment to your practice. But that effort changes things. I tell this story, and it's an important thing to understand. I think as well. I'm not going to say that. I was going to say as Westerners, it might be a little bit more difficult for us because we're so used to instantaneous things. Long efforts are not really a part of our ideal. Here, it's like, oh, I'm hungry. Get me food now. I don't want to wait for it. Don't want to wait for it to be cooked. Just hand me that bucket of chicken now. And we really lose a lot out of the quality of life because of that. And my experience with it, the way that I learned this was my shrine work. And I know I've told this story before, but in San Francisco, I was responsible for keeping the shrine clean and doing the worships in there. And so once a week we'd go through and clean things up. I'd wash the shrine, and it was one of these shrines that had lots of cupolas and onion skin domes on it, and the 400 million little little flowers, little lotuses decorated everywhere. And it was, and in between all the little decorations on the shrine, I had to get in there and I would fold a handkerchief into a point so that I could get that point in between the different leaves, the 5,000 leaves that were around the base of the shrine. And it used to drive me insane. Oh my gosh. I hated that because it took so long, and it just had to be done. And I remember one day I just had it. I was like, I couldn't pretend anymore. And I just sat down on the shrine. I literally sat on the shrine itself, right next to Thakur, between Thakur's cupola and Holy Mother's cupola. I sat right there on that edge. And I just looked at Thakur and says, I've just had it. I said, this shrine is the cleanest room in the monastery, and it's the only one that I have to clean every single day. It's like, I'm just done with it. And I was sitting there like I do after I'd kind of poured this out and, shared my frustration. And I got that really important teaching that day. I really feel like Mother taught me. She said, you know why it's so difficult for you? And, this is all happening, of course, within my head. But she says, you know why it's so difficult for you? And I was like, no, I don't know why it's so difficult for me. She says, because you're always doing it in order to get it done. Mm. She says, if you work in this world in order to get things done, everything you do will be a misery. Mm-hmm. She says, do it to spend time with me. Don't think about what you're doing. Don't imagine there's an end to it. Just do it with me and think of me there as we do this. And so I really, again, like I've been trying this week to change my perspective on that. I really started to try and change my perspective on that in the shrine as well. And I tell you, it didn't take me but 2 days before I saw the difference, a radical difference, in having that attitude about it. Whatever you're doing, never do anything to get it done. Whether it's washing the dishes, sweeping the floor, or vacuuming, don't do things to get them done. Do them to be with the Lord. Do them to be in the presence of God. And everything, especially as you grow, becomes more and more childlike, actually. It just becomes kind of fun, kind of odd in a weird way, because as the truth is dawning on you, the unreality of things and the existence of grace and of this grand love behind everything, the wizard behind the curtain, and you're doing these mundane things, there's a lot of play happens there, a lot of flirting.
That's also karma yoga, isn't it?
That is, in fact, karma yoga. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That is karma yoga. to do things just for the sake of doing them as an
a difference. Like to
What's
me,
that?
karma yoga is doing things for God. But I like, and maybe I just don't understand karma yoga that deeply. You're saying do it with God.
Yeah.
It can be both, obviously. But I like, because, you were talking about being lonely at the beginning of the class.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're with God, then we're not lonely.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's for us, it's impossible to be alone. After you've read the first couple of pages of the gospel, you know that God is always present. If you were ever alone, your body would drop dead because God would no longer be sharing his existence with you. If God wasn't there, your heart would dry up to less than a raisin, because your ability to see love and to share love would disappear. You'd become a drooling idiot because your access to intelligence, your ability to understand, grow, and transcend would disappear. So these are the ways that we know God is true in his commitment to be with us always, because we have existence, because we know and share love, because we have intelligence, so that we learn from our mistakes and we grow not to produce them anymore, and so alleviate our suffering. These are all signs of grace. Anytime.
God is also in a drooling idiot.
It is true. But if you're the drooling idiot,
so
you don't know.
True, Maharaj. I mean, God is also among all these people around me that have dementia, and so many accidents happen right there. But if I don't see God in them, this place is going to be miserable for me.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
You're absolutely right. Because consciousness, you hear God is consciousness, and then there's these people who don't appear to have consciousness, like they're brain dead or whatever, or it's very demented. But I'm thinking, well, God must be more than consciousness, or I don't know, or maybe I don't know what consciousness is.
Well, no, it's God. Consciousness is objects in awareness, but the thing about knowing, you see, yes, God is equally present everywhere. We are all made of divine stuff. That's all. There is nothing but God in everything. And for us as the devotee, we can see that, and we can enjoy that, and we can grow in that because we have that awareness. Our awareness has awoken within. To a certain degree, we've woken up inside. We understand these principles, this ideal. But for somebody, this is the person I'm referring to as the drooling idiot, is someone who's living this life with no idea of anything but materialism, anything but the physical, but the senses. That there's a great deal of pain in living that way, because nothing ever gives you what you're trying to find. There's a great deal of frustration in that. There's a good section of my life was lived like that. And I can tell you the bitterness that it led to. the pain that it led to was excruciating. When getting drunk isn't enough, where do you go? Where do you turn? It's like when going out and partying the night away isn't enough anymore. To put your struggles out of your mind, to forget your problems because they're multiplying all the time. It's a terrible thing when you reach the satiation point or the numbing point of the sense world. That was that night walking up the hill on my way home from the clubs, and sorry to talk about these things, but we learned from them. That the walking up that hill from the clubs that night, and I just thought to myself, it was just kind of a brain fart, as it were. The thought occurred to me as I was walking up the hill. I was like, I'm 25 years old. I can stay out every night of the week till 2:00 in the morning. I can dance my nights away. I said, but what's going to happen to me when I'm 60, when I'm 65 or 70? I said, if I've trained myself to get all of my enjoyment in the world from dancing the night away, from drinking myself under a table, if that becomes my only means for satisfaction in this world, what happens when I'm 70 and I just don't have the energy to get down the hill to walk into the bar? You know, I don't have any of the materials that I had to attract people to me, you know, so that I could have my enjoyments. It's like, what's going to become of me if I train myself that worldly distraction is my highest ideal, that worldly enjoyment is my highest ideal? What will happen when I'm in an old folks' home? My life will be empty, will be bitter, will be a horrible thing of having everything that I desire outside beyond my gates, and I can't have it anymore. What will I become then? You know, and this is what we face, and this is why this is a privilege. This is why we think about these things as a privilege, as being allowed to do this, because Mother is giving you the antidote to all of that. She's giving you the antidote to the bitterness of a desire that can never be fulfilled in this world. You know, she's giving you the antidote. And so we work with her in her company, offering the things that we do for fun with her, not trying to get anything out of the hog plum of the world, not trying to juice a hog plum. We're doing it just for the fun of doing it in the company of the divine. You know, this is the way. This is the secret of work, as Vivekananda says. So let me turn off the recorder here. I haven't done that yet.